welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the authors of an absolutely delightful rom-com series, of a number of series, both together and separately, many wonderful works. And I am so excited to talk about this new installment about some really great TV detectives. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourselves and your book, please?
Yes, so my name is Annie Mare, and we're talking about the second book in our TV detective series, which follows two amateur detectives who started as actors on television playing detectives, and now they're real detectives in Hollywood.
And I'm Ruthie Knox, and we write these mysteries together, and we're married, so we're always together.
It's convenient, you know. Um, Before we get to the new book, I'd love if you could just introduce us a little bit to your careers and your journey as writers and how the collaboration came to be. The creative collaboration as opposed to the marital one. So,
Sure. Yeah.
We both started writing romance in the early 2010s, which was kind of a hilarious moment to launch a career because it was shortly after the first e-readers hit the market. And so all the publishers were doing e-reader only imprints. They'd kind of figured out like, oh, there's a market here for digital books, but we don't really know what to do. So we're just going to launch a whole bunch of experiments and see what happens, which means there were a lot of different ways to get romances out into the world. And that's actually how we met. We were both writing digital romance at the time and liked each other's books. And eventually we got together as a couple, and the digital age started to transition into more of a, paperback came back. And we both had kind of several years there. We were trying different things, but we weren't really publishing. And then around 2019, we started writing a mystery together, and realized it was like a really good way to get ourselves unstuck, like on our individual trajectories. And then we just kind of ended up preferring it and have written a whole bunch of things together.
And so it's same. Like I think that I'm I'm honestly sort of very grateful for my journey because I feel like me and kind of like our whole cohort of debut authors at that time were able to do and try so many things. It was part of like how publishing started having conversations about inclusivity and marginalized authors because you make things more accessible for readers. That means that there's going to necessarily follow, you're going to have to really look hard at why you aren't accessible to marginalized authors. And so that at least began that conversation in genre fiction, particularly. And so I feel like I've had this opportunity to be a part of seeing so many rapid changes in commercial publishing and publishing in general, which has a way of radicalizing you as an author and making it like you just become very intentional about your career, about what you're writing about, um, like making sure you're leveraging your own privilege to like make sure that other authors are coming to the table. So it's been a ride, but fun. Yeah.
That's really interesting how sort of the tumultuous nature of the publishing industry has had a lot of effects, one of which being sort of making room for more voices and for allowing people to find their audiences too before seeking traditional publishing, which I always think is really fascinating too. How does your writing as individuals differ from your writing together? What do you bring to each other's work?
Well, one of the ways we like to talk about collaborative writing is, first of all, everyone should try it who's interested in writing, who's writing like in all different ways. I noticed like the gaming poster behind you in the office, like, whether you're writing like homebrews for tabletop or you're writing books or whatever you're doing, to write with other people because it's actually incredibly intuitive to collaborate and write with other people. We did it as kids when we were on the playground and like making up stories together with your classmates, like you be the evil witch and like I'm the orphan, and then we'll go into this cave and find a treasure. Like we know how to do that with each other, just like we collaborate in theater and improv and music and all these kinds of things. So I think what people would be surprised to know is how intuitive it feels and also how good it feels, and like how much it like hits things like self-doubt and like negative self-talk right at the knees.
Yeah, I mean, it pulls off a lot of the parts of writing that are really about like individualistic, capitalistic, hierarchical, like all the ways that those systems of capitalism, of hierarchy, infect creative work, infect our ability to like be in touch with ourselves and what we want to make and what we're excited about. All those things are very much a part of the publishing process. And even for a lot of people of the writing process, they've kind of like infected creativity. But writing with another person pulls a lot of that out because, first of all, it's easier to notice what you're excited about, what you're joyful about, what you're having fun with. It's also much harder to be critical in an unkind way because you have to be critical of the other person as well. You have to be willing to say to someone else something as mean as you would say to yourself, which
Right.
we are usually not, right? Whereas we're the cruelest when we're talking to ourselves. So it's much more generative and fertile and fun.
But you also like learn how to be productively critical. So if you are working together and you land on things that aren't working, that are clear that aren't working, then it's much easier to find language to fix things without getting mired in, this sucks or like, that kind of thing. Like both of us, I think, have really developed a lot of excellent skills of persistence and revision and rewriting and editing through the process of writing together. So that I know for me, when I'm writing something solo, I have all of these skills that I didn't have before that I gained learning how to work collaboratively with someone else.
Yeah, and I think when people ask that question that you asked, like there's an expectation the answer is going to be like, well, Ruthie's really good at dialogue and Annie's really good at emotions, and she writes one character and I write the other character. But it's really not like that in any way. It's really 100% a group project all the way through, and is in that way very collaborative, very intimate, but also like incredibly productive of, I think, faith, really, because like when you're writing solo, it's very hard to maintain faith in the project, in what you're doing. Even when you have to revise, like the very first feeling you have when you get an editor's letter is this is impossible. But with another person, it just doesn't feel, and nothing feels impossible in the same way. It's just work. And you're like, well, she can do work. I can do work. So you have a much clearer sense of your competence as a writer, and you have faith in the other person's competence.
I really loved your point that it is, very easy to internalize market demands when you are approaching the page, and that having another person with you can kind of inoculate you against that because it's probably easier for the outside person to spot what is making you excited versus what you feel like you need to do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly that.
Yeah, I don't think we're in the habit as humans of assuming that everything we need is already here inside us. We already have everything we need. If we want to tell a story that is inherently something that will be interesting to other people, I think it's probably something that at a library you can see much more easily when you're just watching patrons every day and seeing the variety of things they connect to, the variety of what they're looking for, where they're at in their life and in their journey, and how there's always going to be books that are for some people and not for other people. But I think it's very easy to feel like when you write a book, it is supposed to be for everyone. Everyone is supposed to like it, and that you can't follow an internal guide. You have to use the market as your guide, which is, it's very stultifying
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
to write that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it sure sounds stultifying. And I love that you mentioned that because I think your comments actually speak really nicely to some of the how do I phrase this? You are using like romance and mystery to explore like modern Hollywood in some ways and modern like artistic production and distribution. And I feel like some of the issues you just mentioned are some of those that you are sort of approaching in this novel too. I hope it's a good idea to talk about like themes first before we talk about like characters and plot. But like, what were some of the things that you wanted to explore about like the current Hollywood machine with this with the Love a Comeback?
Well, this was such like a cathartic and meaningful writing process as far as exactly that, because we had this opportunity, because we had established in the first book, Big Name Fan, like all of the overarching themes of the series of like fandom and some of the things in Hollywood that need to be interrogated, like queer baiting and network consolidation and
The difference between wanting to make something and what actually gets made and then how it gets received.
right. And like how it is that viewers and by the analog readers like collaborate with creators, their like feedback and like how they take a story and make it their own. And so with Love a Comeback, we already had this sort of rich matrix to explore some of the other issues prevalent in entertainment. So we had in this book, sort of the core group being investigated is a sort of like a brat pack type group of like actors who were also like Anjane's tastemakers, celebrity, like in the 90s in this way that it's not as if celebrity was new to Hollywood, but like having like a moment of like a particular
Like a celebrity that's bigger than any of the individuals that
yes.
makes it up.
Right.
Right.
Which introduces then, of course, like some interesting things about that and some very unhealthy things for both like the fans and the actors. And then here are two detectives who were not of that moment. They were kids when they were watching these movies. They were inspired by the movies, but they didn't have a good sense of how these young people then were harmed by the Hollywood machine. Because especially at that time, but even now, like studios are going to exploit young Hollywood.
Even something as simple that doesn't get interrogated, like a very young woman being told that she's a director's inspiration.
Or a muse.
Or a muse. You're my muse, says like the 45-year-old man to the 19-year-old girl, right? And so we really wanted to kind of dig into that dynamic. And then also, like, we were very interested in the idea of a comeback. And the title of the book is Love a Comeback, because for so many actors, especially marginalized actors, there's this sort of requirement, even if they're steadily working all along, which they almost always are, that they continually be reinvented as coming back and going away. And like, we haven't heard from so and so in so long, and now they're back with this project. And if you look at their bio, like they've been working, but they can only continue to take up space if they are reinvented over and over and over again. And I think, you see this especially with women actors, but also with, actors of color are just constantly being asked. And at the same time, male actors, especially white male actors, they just have this continuous rise. They just maintain the same level of attention, sometimes even when they're not working. Someone like a Charlie Sheen, is just continuously famous for reasons unclear. So
Right.
we were interested in that too.
Yes, it was very like interested in that because this permeates like all of our industries that rely on like market and capitalism and hierarchy. Like the most exciting author is a debut author. And, there are like many moments in author's career where your team is trying to figure out how to make you seem like a debut, like in a comeback sort of way. Like, do we need a new like author name or have explore a new genre? And all of that kind of stuff like is about feeding the entertainment machine itself without acknowledgement to the creator and without acknowledging their contributions to the art and industry, without giving space to like develop and grow with their craft, to be a human like outside of celebrity. And this also gave us an opportunity to anchor our two detectives as particularly detectives for Hollywood. Because in this book, they're approached by one of those former, we call them the ICE crew members, to find this like missing actor. And she makes it clear that she's coming to them because they understand they understand Hollywood, they understand the town, they understand the ins and the outs, and
They'll have access to people.
they'll have access to people that like would never talk to the police or never tell the truth to the police.
Yeah.
And so then that means like the idea of a Hollywood detective or a TV detective like gains kind of this other layer of depth beyond the hook of a television detective becoming a real detective.
Right, which is kind of a joke and not a joke. Like, what is the difference between playing a detective on TV and being a detective, an amateur detective in real life? Like, maybe nothing.
Like so many of us like truly think that, they would be okay if Noah Wiley was their actual physician.
Yeah.
He seems to have a pretty good handle on things.
Yeah. I'd love to ask a question about how you develop the dynamic between Bex and Sam in this second installment and adapting the will they, won't they to the, post happily ever after, because you do manage to sort of maintain that ambiguous tension of like, is this going to work out? But it makes sense in terms of like the long-term development of their relationship as well. It's not like a reset button, you know?
Yeah, I think it was really fun to play with the scenario that the book sets up is that they got together at the end of Big Name Fan in the sense of talking about the past and sharing their feelings with each other, and they have this intention of being together. But they both have 6 months of work lined up in a row that keeps them in different cities at different times. So they haven't actually been in the same place at the same time since then. And so I think the first question of the happily ever after is like, how are we going to have to rearrange our lives and our priorities in order to align with our new values, which is really the question that we give Sam because Bex has already had to do that. Her parents died and she ended up in taking care of her little sisters when she was very young. So she had to radically rearrange her priorities as a very young woman and is really comfortable with that kind of life of a mother in the sense that she knows how to juggle all the things that need to get done. But Sam has just done what she's been advised to do to get more and more and more famous. So she's just been following all the steps in this machine, and now she has to figure out how to make decisions that are aligned with what she wants, which is not the easiest thing to do, even if it sounds easy.
Right. So that, I mean, it is true that love is central to any book, not just a romance book or, or a genre book, but like the reader has to feel like there was some very like powerful like source of love in this story in some way. Even a horror novel, like you have to feel like you were like extremely connected with like the monster or the monster slayer. And so the tension really then is like how then does love work if you're still growing like as a creator and as a woman and in your career, and like what kind of growth can you anticipate? Because we see in this book very early on Bex quietly deciding she's going to sacrifice something that she loves in order to be with Sam, which of course creates a problem. Like Sam loves her, so that makes her angry, but that's what Bex knows how to do. And like Sam like isn't quite sure how to do anything yet because she hasn't identified what she wants for herself. Your first love, like your first commitment to yourself. So it gave us a chance for Sam to identify that. And, we brought in one of her many brothers so we could kind of see like what context is she emerging from that meant that she has this struggle. And then can we trust that she can take this problem on enough to have this relationship with
Right.
Bex?
And the missing actor, Ramona Watts, becomes a little bit of a mentor for Sam because the more she learns about her, the more she learns about like a different way to make a career in Hollywood and a different way to like cultivate connections and friendships with people that Sam hasn't really figured out herself yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time you said you weren't quite done, so I won't spoil it, although it is a mystery. So it's probably not a spoiler that they solve the mystery,
Yeah.
but by the time, we come to an end point in the story, Ramona Watts has been, a friend in her, even absent, has been a friend to Sam and Bex.
Yeah, like you sort of through the like victimology of learning about the missing person, she actually starts to become close to her in her mind, which then of course also like motivates the stakes of finding this woman.
I really enjoy the way that the relationship arc is paced with the mystery arc. It seems like there's a lot of really interesting like plate spinning that you have to do to sort of like get them both to, be just as pacey at the same time. So I'm always really impressed when that works. And I do think it's a really nice point about, how relationships work, because I think we are all constantly like, renegotiating and reaffirming our happily ever afters, right? Because we are constantly becoming new people with new goals. And so that work is always happening. Like we are always sort of attaining our happily ever after and like working on it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that it's like probably a little bit of an under-acknowledged thing that mystery often does is show how relationships work because we usually have a central figure with a lot of the time a partner. They're not necessarily like the partner, like we might see them come to have this partner, or they might always have been the partner. But we often see in mystery like how these partners turn toward each other in moments of stress, how Gamache, the Louise Penny's detective hero, has like a quiet night at home with his wife who he is obsessed with, and you're like, okay, so that's how love works after 20 years. Or a pair of detectives become each other's support system. So I think it's actually it's a familiar function of mystery to visit and revisit a healthy romantic or non-romantic relationship, but it's not one we acknowledge very often, I don't think. It's kind of fun to have a romance where we can keep coming back to well, now what does it look like? Now what does it look like?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is really lovely. Do you think you'll come back to this one? Are there more stories in store for Sam and Bex?
We do have a story. I mean, we left them at the end. We know that Bex has sort of her dream role and on Broadway, and Broadway was where what she came from initially before she worked in TV. And so what better setting for a mystery than a Broadway closed door theater mystery?
A right on the verge of condemned classic famous Broadway theater.
Yeah. So yes.
Great. Well, I'm very excited about that because I also, one thing I love about mysteries too is that they sort of like let you do like a little bit of anthropology of like a closed world or like how a weird system works, you know? So that's, I think it's going to be a very fun one to read. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, listeners, please check out Love a Comeback. It's absolutely beautiful. And while you're at it, check out Big Name Fan First if you haven't already, because it's also really good. That one I did read the whole one of, and it's fabulous. So, thank you for joining us, everybody. It is now time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.